Calling to order the Medina City Council meeting of Monday, July 9th. Ms. Kellerman, would you please do roll call?
Councilmember Roger Frey.
Here.
Councilmember Jennifer Groen.
Present and accounted for.
Councilmember David Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Alex Marcus.
Present.
Councilmember Sherry Nguyen.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Jessica Rossman.
Here.
And Mayor Cindy Adkins.
Here. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Any changes to the meeting agenda? Hearing none, the meeting agenda is approved by consensus. Any public comment tonight other than the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the presentations. We will skip 4.1 until Claudia Balducci gets here, and we'll go to 4.2, which is the reports and announcements. Mr. Blasey, would you like to go first?
That was quick.
Yeah.
How do we get to this agenda item so quickly? That's what I want to know.
You were on time, so we called on you first.
Let's see if I can get this thing to work. Can you see anything? No?
It should pop up in just a sec. There you go.
Here's the good news. In this nice little community we live in, we have volunteers that volunteer all summer to water the plants up at the Fairweather Park signage.
Oh.
I've even recruited my grandkids. So, know that. The other thing I just want to talk about briefly, we don't have a park board meeting this month, but our last meeting we had considerable discussion on maybe a restroom along the 520 trail. I don't think the park board really came to a decision in terms of advising the city council, but there are no real restrooms along the 520 trail. And I'm not saying that Fairweather Park would be ideal because it's already a little conflicted in terms of bicyclists and what have you. But it's something to think about, put it in your hip pocket, think about the possibility of a regional trail restroom, maybe in Hunts Point, I don't even know. But there's a scarcity of restrooms in the north end. Anyway, that's all I have unless there's further questions.
Any questions for Mr. Blasey?
What do you think of have WASDA to do it because of the lid is owned by WASDA, right?
Well,
And have a WASDA put
we
somewhere
toss
there.
the term WASDA around a lot in these meetings. And I always get the feeling like they're ironclad and they're not going to do anything for us. I don't know if that's your perception, but that's certainly mine. So I think you could maybe talk to them, but I don't know if there's any good.
Okay, any other questions for
Wouldn't
Mr.
that
Blasey?
bathroom in Hunts Point go really nice down by the tennis courts?
Our
Right.
town halls actually uses that already.
Okay,
I'm just-
maybe
I'm
there's
just-
a-
I'm
maybe
just
there's a
teasing.
solution we didn't know about. You know what I mean? Okay.
Okay.
So I have another question unrelated. I saw Colette McMillan last week watering the plants on Fairweather, the new plants, by
Right,
hand
right.
with her kid.
Right.
I was expecting you to ask us for some kind of an improvement on the watering. Is that something that has to be done all the time? Because she said, I stopped and she
the
said there is
plants
no
are new
sprinklers.
plants, so they need a heavy dose of water to
Just to establish?
get going. Yeah,
Okay.
get established, and then nature will take over, and there'll be plenty of rainwater. So we'll probably do it this summer, and then take our chances.
Okay, thanks for doing that. Nice
Yeah.
effort.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schubring?
Really, it's a simple meeting. We had two construction mitigation plans. Not very many amendments. They've gone through and been submitted. They're supposed to, I guess they're going to be signed in the next day or two. So that went well. We decided not to have a July and August meeting, so we'll have a lot to report the next couple months. We discussed a little bit about how we're going to move forward with everything that we talked about, the new documentation, and Steve and I are going to try to take that also and
Yep.
So this time it really is short, not just because it was. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Schubring? Thanks for all your work. Anything for emergency preparedness?
Just next meeting is next Tuesday, July 17th, and we're actually going to have Mike Ryan, who's the Region 1 coordinator, who represents all the cities on the east side. So he's going to be there. We're going to introduce him, and he's got a lot of information on what they've been working on at the state level.
Great. Thank you very much.
May I ask a quick question?
Yes.
I haven't found the Medina Emergency Preparedness Plan. Is that publicly available, or shall I just follow up?
It's
Later.
on the webpage. It should be on the webpage on the emergency preparedness site.
Okay. Sometimes I get lost in the webpage, so.
So
but-
we created emergency preparedness at its own, actually its own department. We moved it out of the police department and created its own site. It should be on there.
Okay.
I'll look because.
That's okay.
I
Let me
haven't
take
looked
another
for a while.
run for it, and then if I can't find it, I'll
I'll
ask
check
you.
it out.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Claudia Balducci, thank you so much for coming. Thanks for all your work on mobility and affordable housing and everything else you do.
So, apologize for being a little late. The last time I got a speeding ticket was in the city of Mercer Island. I was on my way to visit with the mayor there. And to be fair, I was going a little bit over the speed limit, but I did it right in front of a police vehicle. So not smart. And as I pulled into Medina tonight, there was a police vehicle right behind me, one of yours. Very, very slowly on my way.
Smart woman.
I'm sorry, I'd love to contribute to your revenue in another way. Thank you for having me. I just occasionally like to come visit with the cities that I represent. I represent 10 cities in District 6 at King County, and mine is one of them, and just give an update on some of the things going on and answer any questions you may have. And of course, I'm always happy to follow up. I do occasionally meet with the leadership of the cities in between these meetings, but I appreciate the time on your agenda tonight. So some of the things going on in King County. Right now, King County Metro has begun a process to evaluate bus service in the northeast part of King County, mainly around the 520 bridge crossing. My staff and I have been talking with Metro in preparation for this process. It will come to the Mobility Committee of King County, which I chair. The very first thing I want to say out of the gate is this does not include the 271. We've gotten reconfirmation of that because 271 was supposed to have its own separate process, and that is exactly what is happening. So the northeast restructure is really about the 255 and the Sound Transit buses primarily that go across 520 and into downtown Seattle. What's driving that discussion is the fact that the bus tunnel in Seattle is going to close to buses, the transit tunnel is going to close to buses and hold only light rail starting around March of next year when the convention place redevelopment occurs. And so what they're trying to do is figure out a way to maintain speed and reliability through the city of Seattle when that happens because it becomes a tremendous bottleneck. There's going to be public hearings on the restructures of the 255 and the 545, among other buses. I encourage you to provide input if you want to do that. There's plenty of opportunities to do that. If you can't figure out to whom or how, please email me and we'll connect you. There will be public meetings, and it's going to be a very interesting discussion. But I want to once again say that in response to an email that we got, it looked as if there was a proposal to potentially restructure the 271. I have been assured that that is not the case. And there's going to be a meeting, and we're all going to hear it together at the same time, and so we can report back after that. I know that that's a bus that your residents rely on heavily.
Thank you. That was a big upset for people when we thought that that had been, so thank you.
I read that email several times. It was really hard to tell, but I think the person who wrote it was referring to the proposal by the city of Bellevue, not Metro's proposal. But it did lead to, the first time I read it, I thought, what, they're doing what now? So, but we got written confirmation, and hopefully when we all go to this meeting, which is coming up really soon, we'll be able to confirm that again.
Thank you.
Another issue that we're dealing with at Metro right now is the access service, which is our service that we provide to people with disabilities who aren't able to use fixed route bus services. So if you're in a wheelchair or something like that, you can get a door-to-door ride. The contract, we provide the service through contract with a service provider. The contract is coming up, and as we've been working towards a new contract, some of the people who ride the buses, the access buses, represent them have raised some pretty serious issues about the quality of that service. And what's going on, in my opinion, is that if you look at our gross metric statistics, they look great. We provide more service and better service than most of our comparator jurisdictions. However, if you talk to individual people, when the system goes wrong, it goes really wrong. And so you'll have folks waiting for rides that never come. You'll have people, I mean, and these are some of the most vulnerable folks we have. You have adults with severe disabilities whose caregivers or parents are putting them on the bus. They don't show up on the other end for hours. So it doesn't go wrong often, but when it does, it's really problematic. And these are people who really rely on the service. So we're working hard at structuring a new access contract that will make sure that we get at that and provide a more reliable service. And the council recently approved $8 million in service improvements for access, so that should help to increase and better that provision as well. Speaking of fares, you may have heard that there's been some fare discussion at Metro and Sound Transit on buses. Metro recently changed their fare to an all-flat fare. What that means for people riding on the east side is that if you're riding 2 zones, you'll now pay $2.75 instead of $3. The 1 zone fares, which were really only within the city of Seattle, also went to $2.75. On Sound Transit, this is all as part of a regional effort to simplify the fares so that there's not so many different adult regular fares. Sound Transit had proposed to do the same thing, but it would have resulted in a 50-cent increase for east side, I mean, indeed for all of King County riders. So I brought an amendment to put that off for a couple of years because we need to do something when we re-up our ORCA program, but we don't have to do it right now. So your fares, it just happens, will all be $2.75 on both types of service for King County riders from the east side. I would love to report to you on the East Side Rail Corridor. It's one of my favorite things. One of the things I really enjoy about going to work is working on opening up the East Side Rail Corridor to pedestrians and bicyclists and others. And we have had 2 trail openings in the last year. One of them from Renton, Jean Coulon Park, all the way, I can't tell exactly what city it's in when it ends, but it's practically in Factoria. And then we've had the other opening that connects to the Cross Kirkland Corridor, right at the Bellevue-Kirkland line, and goes down to the south of the Sound Transit OMSF, the maintenance base station. So eventually we're going to hook up in Bellevue, and this will be a great amenity for everybody on the east side to enjoy. It's been really fun to see that coming along. We now have a connection to the 520 trail, sort of, and so people can get east, west, and north, south. And I'm really looking forward to having connection to the 90 trail as well. It's been a big year in human services. You may recall last year the voters passed and renewed what we call the Veterans and Human Services Levy, now called the Veterans, Seniors and Human Services Levy, which will raise approximately $354 million over 6 years countywide. And what we're going to be working on is 2 new things. Adding seniors as a population that we will serve with that money, which is a big deal because we didn't have any dedicated seniors money previously, and focusing on housing because that's really one of our #1 challenges that we have. As we prepared the ordinance for the ballot, I want you to know that I fought hard to make sure that seniors got a fair share because there were some people who wanted to hang on to it. Mostly this is like half for vets and half for human services, but I wanted to make sure that everybody got a fair share. So seniors will get approximately 1/3 of the money. But it's all, and I think you probably see this, the demographics on the east side are heavily aging. So we're looking forward to we're now working on the implementation plan. That's going to be coming through the Regional Policy Committee this week, I believe. And you're represented there by the SCA, Sound Cities Association, but also please don't hesitate to let me know if you hear as this is coming through, if there are issues that you have. I'm there for you as well. All right. And then one of the oddities of Sound Transit 3 is that there is a separate fund of money created under Sound Transit 3 called the Puget Sound Taxpayer Accountability Act, which is unfortunately acronyms to PASTA account. So the PASTA account is the amount of money that Sound Transit has to pay for its in lieu of sales tax on their construction projects. It all goes into an account that must be used for education. This was just one of those sausage-making deals that happened in Olympia when they decided on the law that gave the Sound Transit the authority to go ahead with the ST3. So we will be working on what we do do with that money, because it comes through the county. It doesn't start, it starts coming in next year, but it really doesn't start in earnest until 2020, 2021. But we have adopted a policy statement that says we want to use the fund in 3 areas: early learning, K through 12, and community and technical colleges. It is a new area for the county. We will be doing outreach in the next few months about what we should do with this. We don't want to invent the wheel, and we don't want to become education experts. We want to fund the places where it makes sense that we know we already have needs. So we'll be putting out, we'll be having some public meetings and putting out information on that as well, and look forward to any questions you may have or any input you may have on that.
What's the size of that fund?
It is, over the entire life, it is about $318 million for King County alone. I couldn't tell you how much for Snohomish and Pierce, but that's how much is coming to King.
Thank you.
Over about 20 years.
Okay.
And then, as you know, we're working very hard on housing and homelessness at King County. I started a regional affordable housing task force last year, and we're about to wrap up our work pretty soon with some recommendations for how we might work together, cities and the county, to try to address the housing affordability crisis that we're all experiencing. It's my belief that the cities carry the load here, and that we should figure out how to support cities in doing that. And I think that we've made some good progress, but again, we're going to be looking to recommendations out of that body in September through the end of the year. I guess the last thing I will say is that every year to every other year, we have some opportunities to do small grants and small kind of donations. We do a van donation. The King County has a great program, first in the nation program for metro van pools, but there's FTA regulations that say how many miles that we can use them for, and when they hit that deadline, there's still a lot of life in them. And so one of the things that the council does is we donate them to charities. So every year, District 6 gets 2, 3, 4 vans to give away. Many years it's not hard to do it all. Some years, like this year, I'm lacking some applications. So if you ever know of anybody in your orbit, here in Medina or elsewhere, please do let us know that could benefit from a van to help carry. They're supposed to be used to carry clients. So I've donated vans to places like the Bellevue Boys and Girls Club, to ferry kids around, to domestic violence programs, and others like that. When we come out of this budget, I know I've talked to you about this in years past, there will probably be another round of what we're calling Get Active, Stay Active grants. Money, again, it passes through the county, it comes from the state. It's it's rental car taxes. You know, not something we pass, but something we get. And we're able to do small sports grants related to parks or sports activities. That'll start up again next year. So we'll, again, when we see how much that's going to be, we'll reach out to you to see if there's anything we can do to support your residents. And 2 major hot topics currently coming up. We're going to be talking about the executive's proposal for a land conservation initiative, which you may have heard about, which is a bonding measure that he's proposing, and also a bonding measure to potentially support maintenance at Safeco Field, which you may have heard about. So that is just a small sampling of what we've got going on at King County. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have either now or at some other point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions?
I have a question. We have a subject now with the new trail, the 520 that's opening, is the need for bathrooms on the trail. And you mentioned Sound Transit, you mentioned Metro, you mentioned the Coulon Park to Factoria.
Right.
What's the approach of the county as far as providing bathrooms? How come, like, a lot of park and ride do not have bathrooms?
Right.
Or the trails, do you have a decision, for example, every few miles there should be a public bathroom or not?
So this is an issue that I've brought up at Sound Transit and at Metro over the years because it comes up a lot for seniors and for people with kids and others. And the answer that I have heard to date, not that the issue's over, but it is really, really challenging to keep them clean and policed properly so that they don't become cesspools and or magnets for crime, particularly drug deals.
I see.
And so I think it's a conversation we need to continue to have, because I don't think that's the end of the story. I think we have to figure out a way that we can work with those realities and that risk and still provide that kind of service, because it comes up frequently. I don't have a good answer for you tonight, but I know I keep it on the radar screen at Sound Transit at the very least, and I'm happy to bring it up to Metro again as well. I mean, even the elevators are pretty awful at some of these locations where we have elevators.
Yeah.
I think that's partially because there are no bathrooms, but that's just my hypothesis.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. If there's no objection, the consent agenda will be approved by consensus. Hearing no objection, the consent agenda is approved. Next item of business is to continue the public hearing on the zoning map amendments on the rooftop play area. This is the continuation of the public hearing for the zoning map amendments and rooftop play area text amendments. The continued hearing is now open. All persons wishing to be heard should have signed in. I've got 2 speaker cards. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard during the public hearing? Okay. The public hearing will proceed in an orderly fashion. We will start with the order of speaking will be staff presentation by Christina Hayworth, comment from members of the public, response from staff, and then questions and discussion with the council members. So before we hear from the public, I'll introduce Christina Hayworth, and she'll make our staff presentation. Thank you, Christina.
I included a few slides from our last meeting, just in case there was anyone new, but I think everyone here is a familiar face, so I will go ahead and skip to Okay, so we have a few open items left for discussion, things that you asked us to follow up on last time. And then, again, we have a couple of speakers, and then staff anticipates the city council to take final action tonight, assuming everything seems resolved. So that's what this presentation addresses. Beginning with discussion issues. The first item for discussion, here we go. The visual representation of the setback language that that you guys added into the code or the proposed ordinance last time. So we have prepared revised diagrams showing the changes. This is Medina Elementary School. So previously, the west side had a 55-foot setback. That was revised to 60 feet unless it's adjacent to a residential zone, and then it becomes 150 feet. So you can see that change has been made. On Bellevue Christian School, we've added setback language back in to address the setback from the SR 520 right-of-way and on the east side. And then the St. Thomas School, this one is pretty much the same as last time. And these should all be in your packets, so hopefully you've had a chance to look at them. Question number 2 was how impacts are identified and evaluated and how mitigation is determined to be appropriate to those impacts. So just really quickly, the impacts that we could foresee right off the bat included lighting, noise, and aesthetic impacts, or what we call visual impacts in the ordinance. So the proposed code language requires certain studies to be prepared in advance. So that includes a visual or view shed analysis, a lighting plan consistent with language that's already in the code, and then noise analysis, similar to but expanded on the version that you saw with at our last meeting. These studies are currently reviewed in-house and or by third-party consultants. So where we don't have any kind of expertise, we send that out for review. This is specific to the noise study, for example, whereas we typically review the visual impact analyses in-house. Potential mitigation is identified typically in those studies. If something is not addressed adequately from the city's perspective, then we do have the authority to require additional mitigation measures. So that might include additional screening, either through fencing or vegetation. We could consider restricting a color palette on materials, downshielding lighting to make sure there's no glare on adjacent properties, use of different or more sound dampening materials to ensure that noise impacts are mitigated to the best of current best practices. And then again, there's the consultants preparing these reports tend to provide a whole list of recommendations. And then we require those recommendations to be followed as conditions of approval through the permitting process. Other impacts. What other impacts might there be? So we would typically identify these either during the technical review process or during public comment. Somebody says, hey, why didn't you consider X thing? That's an opportunity for us to have the applicant come back and take a look at that particular issue. We could require additional studies to be done with additional impact or mitigation measures identified for any impacts that were identified, and then again require those as conditions of approval. The last question that was brought up was the issue of height with respect to the parapets. So as the code is currently written, the parapets are seen as an extension of the base building and not part of the bonus height area. And so those parapets would be limited currently to 35 feet. So that's kind of the gist of the topics that you had for discussion. Were there any other questions?
I guess I had a question. I'm sorry. Can you go back to the images that you had of the schools? So if you can go back to, thank you, to Medina Elementary. So just, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. What I think I heard you say is the setback for the west side, in the language of the ordinance, it was changed from 60 feet to 150 feet. Is that what I heard you say?
Correct. So this side is adjacent to a residential use.
Right.
And so there's a provision that requires 150-foot setback from a public right-of-way or any residential use. And so in this case, even though that's considered a side property line and would typically have a 60-foot setback because there's a residential use on the other side, that jumps back out to 150 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so we'll hear from the public comment, and then we'll reserve the right to come back and ask you questions. Thank you. So we've got Mr. Wheeler, Mr. Morrison, and Ms. Nordstrom. Who would like to go first?
Good evening, everyone. I feel like I know you all well by now. I've been here quite a few times. Kirk Wheeler, I'm the head of school at St. Thomas School, and I just have a few comments, and I'll keep them pretty brief. First of all, I just really want to thank all of you for your time and for your energy, in addition to the Planning Commission and certainly staff. There's been a lot of time and attention and work, I know, put into this process, and we certainly appreciate that. It's been a good process. It certainly has caused us as a school to do a lot of reflection. At the same time, obviously, our goal has been to be able to fulfill our vision and move forward. And again, we appreciate the process as we're able to achieve that goal. And really, I just encourage you this evening to approve the code amendments this evening. And I'll just wrap up again by thanking you for your time and your energy and your very thoughtful questions along the way. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Mr. Morrison.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Ian Morrison with McCullough Hill Beery. For the record, on behalf of St. Thomas, and again, want to echo Dr. Wheeler's comments and say thank you. You know, we came to the City Council in November of last year with a vision to talk about how do we set a framework and a policy direction to allow for rooftop play areas. And through the excellent work of your staff, and I want to say specifically thank you to Robert, who's no longer here, to Steve, to Christina, to the city attorney and the city manager, you know, this is how the policy process should work. We've heard throughout this 8 months and multiple public hearings, multiple public meetings, both in here and also at St. Thomas, we've heard universally that this is something that's been supported by the members of Medina, but we've also heard that there have been questions about how do we ensure mitigation at the policy level around noise, light, and views. And we think through consultation with Planning Commission, I don't want to recognize the Planning Commission chair, the work with the Planning Commissioners, this framework sets up an innovative and excellent policy framework to allow for protection of the character of the community of Medina, protection of any mitigation with a project-specific application that allows for evaluation of noise, consistent with the way that your code evaluates noise, that protects from views and ensures that this is a design that's consistent with the character. And so we think that this is an excellent example of how the policy process should work. We think that through the 8-month period, the evolution and the discussion, this has been an iterative process, and the code that is before you tonight, particularly the code that Mr. Masal and Mr. Wilcox and Ms. Hayworth have drafted, addresses all the comments that we've heard from the community, from the council, and really is an excellent piece of policymaking by the city. And so we would ask that the council, it is the World Cup a month, so I've held back from all the sports analogies, but I feel like we're at that penalty kick and we're asking to get it over the goal line. So we would ask for the council's support tonight. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Okay, so we'll set her aside for now. Okay.
I think we can withdraw that comment. She might be stuck in that same traffic that Councilmember Balducci was in.
Okay, okay. So next up, is there any response to staff? I would guess no. This is just next in line is any response from staff to anything you heard from the public comment? Okay. So throw it open to council. Do you have any questions? Ready for discussion?
I have a question. Can someone, maybe for the council, just briefly recap the amount and type of outreach that was done to the public to make sure that they're notified about this and made aware?
Sure.
Can someone just briefly recap that?
Sure.
Mike, can you pull that forward? Because we were having some problems here in the last meeting.
Thank you.
For this meeting specifically, we sent out a postcard citywide. We did a couple of email blasts to all the people that are on our email list, and we had information on the city's website. Previously, for any public meetings, there were email blasts and the usual advertisement of the meetings. At open houses, we sent out postcards before the open houses, again citywide, to let people know that the event was going to be taking place. So, usually that's the level we would do for something that would be this important.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
That was my
To
question.
that point, I think that we've been advertising these as impacting St. Thomas as opposed to Medina. And I know we talked about this last time, that it's the focus of the outreach has been about St. Thomas School. And I don't think that the people around Medina or Bellevue Christian have had enough awareness that this is specifically going to impact them. And I don't think that's changed since we talked about it last month. I think a generic notice that we're going to be talking about school top playgrounds, given all the focus has been on St. Thomas, I don't think it's been adequate. And I was just looking at my email, I don't see that there's been an e-alert about this meeting. So I think it would be helpful to get a list before we vote about who's been outreached around the other schools who are impacted properties.
Well, again, the postcard that we sent out was citywide. is there, I mean, is there something specifically that you would like us to provide information to specific neighborhoods?
I don't think that this is like a new request. I mean, we always hear people who come and complain after the fact because we don't maybe necessarily do the best job of reaching out. And I think maybe most people in the community think that this is about St. Thomas as opposed to the other schools. And I don't know what our numbers are for our traffic to our website, but I don't think a lot of people self-serve and go and see what's up at the city council meetings on our website on a monthly basis. Meanwhile, we spend a lot of effort on getting people to attend for other things. So, you know, I just feel like we're going to get a lot of backlash from the other residents.
What would you recommend as opposed to, I mean, he sent out a citywide mailer.
Right, one.
Well, in addition to the other citywide mailer that was sent out a couple of months ago.
I mean, there's been notification for other open houses, and, I mean, this is probably the same level of information that we sent out for, say, the 84th project. Now, granted, that project lasted over a 5-year period, so there were a number of open houses and a number of different public meetings, but, you know, this process has been going on for 6 months as opposed to 4 or 5 years.
Well, if I go to the homepage right now, there's a quick link for the 84th Avenue project and a little thing about news and announcements for the school rooftop play area, so I don't think it's getting the same amount of messaging.
Mike, can you help us understand the maybe qualitatively speaking, like the amount of outreach for St. Thomas versus some other type of project? Like if there's a low, medium, high, extra high, I mean, can you give us a sense of that? I mean, I don't know how to quantify it, but can you maybe help paint a picture for the
if there
team?
is an issue of, I'll call it citywide interest, and usually you can think of what those things are. You know, something like a tree code or view in sunlight. You know, we try to go the extra mile and give additional, you know, notices. Now, we're required by law to do a certain level of notice for any kind of public hearing, and let's call that the baseline. As you say, maybe that's you know, medium or low. For this project, we definitely have gone to a higher level.
Because I'm asking because this is a citywide issue.
Because we think this is an issue of citywide interest. Like I said, you know, you can always give a couple other examples.
Sure.
And that's kind of the level of exposure that we've tried to give this and the level of public information. You know, to Jen's point, the traffic to our website is probably pretty low. But, you know, again, there's also the, you know, leading the horse to water and hoping that they drink.
Well, we don't post World Cup scores on our website, so that probably
not since Germany's been out. No.
That's right. Thank you.
So I do remember when Mr. Grumbach was here, it was important to him that we send a community-wide postcard as well. And when he held the open house, he made sure that they had posters of all of the schools. So I do know that it was important to the Planning Commission and to Mr. Grumbach that it goes citywide, and then that it goes citywide again a second time with the postcard. So in my limited experience, I haven't been on council for very long, but this falls into the high outreach from what I've seen.
And as long as we're on the subject, unless, I do echo those concerns in general, in particular because this was the end of the school year, which for many of our families, it's a difficult time to pay attention. And then our most recent citywide postcard went out after we began the public hearing. I think I expressed that to some of you, that I was surprised because I hadn't known until I saw the agenda for last meeting that we were having a public hearing at that meeting, and I feel like I am paying attention. So I feel like at this point, because Planning Commission did send out a postcard to the open house, and I have told people in as much as I can that although this seems like an issue that people would get into, maybe it's just not. That being said, I have some ideas for the future because this is the first time I've been through this much process, and I've been paying attention, and I think it is, although you can't lead a horse to water, you certainly can make water as available as possible. And I also think that appearances count, and that it's better not to give anyone an opening to have any perception that this happened quickly, or anything in the future might happen quickly when they weren't looking. That's not to say, and I don't want anyone to understand me to be saying that I think anyone did anything wrong, or that anyone, that we didn't meet requirements or anything like that. Just that I think it's something that that we can look at doing more in the future.
Yeah, well, and to that point, as I've told all of you, I think individually, the last thing city staff ever wants council to do is to vote or make a decision on an issue that you are not prepared to do so. If you are not prepared to make a decision, please don't make a decision. If you feel that you need more information, if you feel that you need more input on an issue, I'd much rather that you request that and we provide it to you than you feel pressured to move forward on an issue before you're prepared to do so.
Well, it seems to me the question is not questioning the code, because I think we all agree and we spend a lot of time on it, and it's a well-written code. The staff have done a very good job. The Planning Commission, we reviewed it last month, and the legal team has refined it. So the question whether people heard about it or not, I think we have done enough between the open house and the public hearing now and the last month to reach out to people. And those people we have heard from, who showed up at the last meeting, they were very positive about that. I haven't seen anyone complaining about it. I don't see anyone complaining about Medina Elementary or Bellevue Christian with 150 foot. I don't think that it's going to be a problem. This is my opinion. But we heard that it's been taking over 8 months. The school has to have a decision. It's important for us to decide one way or the other.
I think, to your point, though, that the school has been getting the people to come and provide positive comments, and there's nothing wrong with that, of course, but I still do get the sense, though, that the other people aren't aware of what's going on.
Well, that's true, but I've been here for a long time, and even when we were talking about the tree code, and we tell people everything we can, and we send all these flyers, and then you have maybe 5 people, 10 people to show up. This is Medina. Typically, people do not, but we have submitted enough. At least the city has published that information. So in favor of doing that, of making a decision, I'd like to make a motion at this point, so we can decide one way or the other.
Okay.
So I move to adopt the text and the zoning amendment, map amendment, in the form of attachment 2 and attachment 3 to the July 9, 2018 staff report on school rooftop play areas.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay.
My point is now we can decide whether we want to do something about it. I think we discussed all the internals. I'm happy with the amendments that we proposed last month, and they have been included in that code. So I feel this is a good resolution. It's a good zoning map amendment, and I'm happy with it. That's why I would support, if we were voting for it, in favor of this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Marcos. Anyone else?
I would like to discuss the parapet height limit. So I suppose I could do that in the form of a motion, if that would be the most appropriate way.
Would you like to amend his motion?
I would move to amend the draft code that would be under Section B, Development Standards in 3A. It says, "The finished rooftop play area shall be surfaced with sound dampening material and shall not exceed 30 feet in height from the low point of original or finished grade as measured under MMC 20.23.060C. No portion of any building or structure shall extend into the rooftop play area bonus height except stair and elevator penthouses and security barriers. And then we have e.g. parapets. So I would amend that to add parapets shall not extend beyond 35 feet in height.
May I, could I ask you if this would be acceptable to you? This is something that the attorneys looked at. And parapets shall not exceed 35 feet in height from the low point of original or finished grade as measured under MMC 20.23.060C.
Yes, I would be happy to amend my motion to that language.
Okay, it's been moved to make that amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Let's vote on that amendment. All in favor, please say aye.
So let me just ask a question. So what's the difference from what we used to have versus the change?
Well,
Just in plain language.
The difference is that right now, to a layperson like us, we wouldn't necessarily understand that the parapet is part of the wall and therefore is capped at 35 feet. This revision makes it absolutely clear that the parapets can't extend
Very good.
beyond 35 feet.
Do we have a definition of parapet?
It's a accepted word. We looked it up. It has a generic definition. It just means a part of a wall.
So why are we calling it out separately?
Because it's a part of a security wall that commonly goes across a roof.
We have security barriers, why don't we need to call it parapet separately if that's the definition of it?
It doesn't have to be, it's just a clarification. That's why I asked. It's just to clarify so people don't take it as the floor of the rooftop is 35 feet and then you have another parapet on top of it. No,
Well,
that's not the case.
My concern is that somebody could call it, that's not a parapet, that's something else, and get around the rule.
Christina, is the word parapet a pretty commonly accepted term? I mean, we were using parapet before. It doesn't,
A parapet is a commonly accepted word. It's an architectural feature. It does mean an extension of the wall vertically from above the rooftop.
okay.
I have
Any
a
other-
question. Excuse me, maybe I didn't understand. So you're talking about 35 feet, is it from the ground level or from the rooftop? Because that would be 60 feet from the rooftop.
It's-
Because those is, huh? From the ground level,
Correct.
so it
It's-
would be not that big, right?
Right, it's
35 feet is.
35 feet is the height that's allowed now for any new school building on a school property.
Right.
And so the parapet would still be at that same height. The surface of the play area would be at 30 feet, so you would have a 5-foot, up to 5-foot parapet on top of that.
So it basically allows the exterior wall to be as tall as we previously allowed the building to be, with the floor of the play area being at 30 feet. That's my understanding.
That's correct.
Right?
Okay, any other further discussion before we vote? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Ms. Garone, no?
That's
Okay.
the amendment.
As the amendment? Any other amendments before we vote on the main motion?
There's two questions I think that I have. I think it's just more, I just wanted to get some feedback or just a summary of two things. Whether, as we've been going through number one, as we've been going through this discussion, has there been other jurisdictions, other school districts have been interested as part of this discussion? And then number two, I think it'd be, just as part of the summary of people that, if people's, for me, as I was going through all my emails about this, through council, through some planning commission, et cetera, to hear what the feedback is. And I think it's just good to perhaps just summarize that from the city, from planning commission, and then from people as well. That's just what I'd like to hear, those 2 points.
Can I ask you for clarification about the second point? What is it whose feedback would you like
It's just a quick summary
summarized?
from people about, for me, it's just, when I was going through, it's just generally positive overall. I'm just trying to see, if I'm trying to recall part of the discussions of planning commission, it's of meetings that I didn't participate in, are there certain issues or things that people had specifically discussed in terms of why they didn't want to go through with this?
So is the question, Was there negative feedback, and if so, what was it about?
Yeah, generally. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Christina, did you receive any?
So in response to your first question, nobody has reached out to us from any other schools or school districts. And I did just a quick chat with the St. Thomas team, and nobody's reached out to them specifically either. For your second question, we haven't received any negative feedback on the proposal. I did get one question, which is, oh, I thought this happened already. What, is it not done yet? But that's the extent of the comment that we've received since the last meeting.
Okay.
David, other questions?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else, questions or discussion before we vote on the main motion? Okay, all in favor of the main motion, please say, as amended, please say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Ms. Groen, nay? Okay, the motion carries as amended. Thank you. Moving on to the city manager's report. Who would you like to start with? Mr. Burns?
Good evening, Your Honor. Let's start with Chief Burns.
Good evening, everyone. So for the month of June, real quick, we participated in 2 field days. Those are good opportunities to get out and be with the kids. We were at Bellevue Christian as well as Medina. We did the radar for the pitches. And so the top pitch was 55 miles an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who was that?
Probably faster than most of the adults out there.
You signed the kid to a contract?
Yeah, he was a good kid. So there's actually another kid that pitched 54, and he kept trying to beat the 55. So our lifeguard started June 25th. I want to thank Jen Newton. She started this thing back before the year even started. Really good lifeguards. They've been out there working. We actually got some good feedback already. As far as my report, you'll see that there was an arson. I want to put people's minds at ease. We had to list it as an arson. It was a very poor attempt of arson. We think it was an intoxicated person trying to light a car on fire. And again, it sounds worse than it is. I don't want people to freak out. But we had to list it that way because there's certain criteria that we list crimes. The third thing was we had a fraud, and our fraud numbers are down, but the interesting about this one, it was a Champs purchase that the person called in, the homeowner called us in, and what triggered them, they saw the charge, and then when the officer started looking into it, and this is where sometimes criminals aren't always smart, is originally it was going to go to the Medina resident that the card had been stolen, the credit card from. He changed the order to his name and his address in New York. And so the officer was able to track the suspect back to New York, and there was other charges that he had made with other credit cards. We actually are working with New York Police Department to give them some information. So New York took it because the resident lives there. The purchases were made back there, but they were interested in it. I thought we were going to get blown off, but they were actually pretty interested. And I credit the officer. I mean, a lot of times we can just take a report and be done with it, but generally speaking, our officers will take any case and at least try to run it to exhaustion. Fourth thing I wanted to talk about, that was the fourth thing, so I'm moving right along. Patrol traffic in parks. Our officers do a lot of time patrolling the parks, especially now. We are coming into people violating our park rules of after 10 o'clock. We're spending a lot of time at Fairweather Park, all hours, just because of the concerns with the 520 trail. Overview Park, we're paying close attention to because it's dark, out of the way. Medina Beach Park, just because it's our office. We usually get that one. And surprisingly, Medina Park has been quiet. In years past, Medina Park was our concern. There was a question raised about traffic enforcement in Medina. Our officers have worked a lot of traffic enforcement. I will speak for the captain, Captain Scherf and I have spent a lot of times out there working it. We can go long distances of time without seeing people speed. Now, I'm not saying people don't speed in Medina. I worked up with the State Patrol for 25 years, and we would work the same spot day after day, and we would catch speeders day after day. We do spend a lot of time out there. We did get one resident that called in a person picking up their child at Bellevue Christian. They were doing 40 miles an hour. And I said, okay, well, we'll send an officer out there. And sure enough, the guy was doing 40 miles an hour every single day. So we were able to catch him and cite him. We take our complaints seriously. We're out there working. But I would say as a whole, our residents and contractors usually drive right around the speed limit. And I know that our tickets are down. It's just our speeds are just not up at that level. And I say that from experience because I'm out there. I would encourage, if you're concerned, to come out and ride with our officers, and you get to see what we get to see. We have brand new radars in those cars that you guys bought for us. They work front and backwards, and so we're always working traffic.
That's a great offer. So people can
Yeah.
just contact you if they want to do a ride-along?
Yeah, and you know what? That offer goes to, and I just want to add, we spend time in Hunts Point because they have the same issues that our residents do too. And we've spent a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of time because that's just part of what our job is. And I hear these complaints and I take them seriously, and we put the officers out there. It's just I can't manufacture numbers. And so I got to take what kind of comes to me, but we're out there. So
I go for a walk every evening down Evergreen Point Road, down 24th. And, you know, I have a bit of a heavy foot, but there are people going by easily 40 all the time. At least half of the cars are going by really quickly. And you guys aren't there, and maybe that's why they're going fast. But especially with college kids home now, and people dropping off people at the park and ride. I mean, somebody was easily doing 45 yesterday. I took a picture of one car because I was like, I cannot believe how fast they're going.
Right.
And they don't even slow down when you look at them. And I'm not a cop, so I'm not going to look at them or say anything or put my hand out like other people do when you're doing 26. But you know, you don't hear that anymore.
I agree with Ms. Garone. I see a lot of speeding, at least from I walk the similar path, and I don't know if it's because of the lid, because it opens up or something, but like people, I mean, they don't race, but they go pretty fast, and
okay.
And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just an inviting little spot to kind of open it up or something, but I've seen the same thing. And
Are you talking about Evergreen Point and
where the park and ride, yeah.
It's the park and ride.
Yeah, the park and ride.
That's the people who are not residents,
Yeah.
coming just on a hurry to commute. That's what I see them, leaving the park and ride and taking off very fast.
Or they're Lyft drivers dropping people off.
Sometimes, yeah.
Well, I'm not going to argue with you guys on it, but we've sat out there for hours between 24th and 28th. We worked it in the morning and we worked it in the evening. And I'll tell you what, when somebody comes through at like 35, it does stick out. And it looks like 50 because everybody's doing 25.
Right.
We'll put people out there. Here is part of the issue. There's other parts of the city that we're responsible for. We're responsible for Hunts Point. And so while I want to be everywhere doing everything, it's I'm trying not to get defensive with this because honestly, we're spending a lot of time working this. But even to talking to the officers, they're seeing cars at 33 that we're stopping, which that's a good stop. But we're generally, as a rule, we're just not seeing the 40, 45s. And we had a bus stop issue where it was on 24th. They'd moved it to 24th. And we had some residents that were, flabbergasted because cars are doing 40, 45. The officer got his radar out and was out there, and they're like, look, see, that one's doing 45. It was doing 31. So, I mean, we're going to continue to do what we're doing, and we're going to work hard, and we'll send people out there. It's just, I'm not going to catch everybody.
Maybe it just seems faster than it is. Like
well, and that's why I would love for you guys to come out and ride and see what we see, because it's not that we're avoiding it. Trust me, our guys want to stop those guys, and we want to ride.
How about
things.
you guys take off the uniform and come with us on our evening walks?
Sure. Yeah, if you pay us to do it, we'll do it. And I have no doubt, here's the thing, I have no doubt those people are driving fast. It's just, I can't catch what I don't see. Now, when people say, we got a problem on this street during this times, and we go out and work it, that's perfect for us. And you've given me some good info, but we are out there. And we're
Can we
trying to
put,
keep it
Some
slow.
temporary or permanent speed flashing things like they have on Clyde Hill down 24? Because some people drive, including myself, I don't realize if I'm going fast until I see this thing flashing. It flashes at 26, then I remember, I slow down. So I've seen you put some of these sometimes moving around, not permanent.
Yeah.
Maybe like in that location, if we put it and leave it, so people realize that they are going too fast, and then when we are walking, we can see that actually it's flashing at 35.
Okay.
Is that-
Are you talking the permanent one or the temporary one?
Well, I mean, we have temporary now. If you want, do temporary. I don't know if you want to do a permanent.
So I would say,
But Clyde Hill, they do have permanent.
I will comment on if you're looking at anything, anytime we put the temporary out there, we usually get a call from a resident that thing sits in front of, when are you gonna move it? So, I'll go put it up there. I mean, because if that will help slow people down, that's always an option.
Is that information recorded in terms of, because you'll just flash, you know, you're going 20, 26, 35. I think one of the things that might be useful is to see, you know, you record that over a period of time to see, hey, are we getting people that are hitting 45?
So we have a similar circumstance in Hunts Point, one main road, 80% of our population drives on it. We had a resident that came and, you know, excessive speeds, our speed limit is 20 miles an hour. You know, we're seeing speeds 35, 40 miles an hour. We called Clyde Hill, and they let us borrow a speed measuring mechanism that we basically put in the roadway for a week's time and got a real look at the actual speeds, and they were roughly, you know, 27 miles an hour at most. And so it's just an opportunity, and it was free. They didn't charge us anything, and you actually get real numbers at the end of the day. That was really helpful to move the conversation along.
That would be great, thank you.
Good idea.
That might be interesting.
Okay, we'll do it.
Thank you.
Good discussion.
I have another
Any other-
question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, Sunday, I was walking with my family. We went from our house into Fairweather, turned around to leave Fairweather. We're walking south on Evergreen Point, right where the bikers come up off the bridge. They're going they're going eastbound across Evergreen to continue on the trail. And I was about 50 feet away from that crosswalk. I saw a bicyclist coming. I saw a car southbound on Evergreen. Neither was stopping. And I'm waiting to see what happens. And at the very last minute, the bicyclist stops. Car goes through. She's angry. I look, I see there are, I think, 3 stop signs for the bicyclists. They're not stopping. And my question is, in that situation, are they supposed to, like, I know if it's a pedestrian, I know you need to stop and like look both ways, and pedestrians always have right of way, but like they were really close to hitting. She only stopped when she really realized like the car is not stopping for her. So she has stop signs. The car doesn't have a stop sign. Is the car supposed to stop for
No.
her?
The stop sign is for the bikes.
So, okay.
Yeah, and so to kind of carry that question forward, we have increased our bicycle enforcement along for stop signs.
Right.
We've ordered signs to further advise the bicyclists they have to stop, which I have another comment about that. But we have signs that are coming to tell the bicyclists they have to stop at our stop signs.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, I looked and I think I saw at least 3 stop signs for eastbound bicyclists, like when you right before the thing, and like.
I know of at least 2.
Yeah,
for sure.
At least 2.
Right.
So I was just curious about it because I'm sitting here watching this all sort of unfold in slow motion, waiting to see what's going to happen. And she had about 2 or 3 feet, and then she finally paid attention.
Yeah, and the bicyclist has to stop. And this is the first true riding season that we're going to be dealing with, because last year the trail didn't open until after really the peak riding season. So we're going to be paying attention to that, but I shouldn't say but. And we are working with WashDOT on ways to try to reinforce the stop at Evergreen Point.
Okay.
I've noticed that when the signs are put in the place where they were like in the middle of the trail, that they move them over.
So they actually
just
attached
move
them to the stop sign. And since they've been the ones down by the ground have been attached to the stop sign, I haven't seen them been moved or kicked over or whatever they were doing.
Is it possible to get like a flashing light for the cyclist that says vehicle on roadway ahead, like we do for deer? So that, 50 feet out, the light starts flashing, so it's.
Like one of those bus merge lights on 520? The bus is coming? Yeah.
Well, it's not like they don't see
Might
the car.
be-
They see the
they
car,
know.
like Roger said, they just don't stop. Bikers don't like to stop because it takes a lot
Yeah,
of
that's
effort.
why I'm asking a question about
to
who has
stop.
the right, like, who's right here? Because, like, both are clearly thinking they're right here.
The bicyclist has to stop. And it's interesting when we're out stopping the bicyclists for blowing the stop signs, we get told the same reason, which is,
I don't like to stop either.
well, and that's what I tell them. I actually had a nice run-in with a bicyclist up here. Most of the bicyclists are pretty decent to work with, and they understand why we do what we're doing, especially with all the driveways and everything. But I was telling the officers, it was the first time I'd actually gotten somebody who gave me a lot of lip about the stop signs. And I'm like, the easy answer to all of this is we can just start handing out tickets left and right. But I really don't want to get to that point. I'm not afraid to. But it's more, through all of this stuff that we're talking about, it's a public safety issue, and we just don't want anybody getting hurt.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. I don't want a bicyclist getting hurt. I don't want a driver hitting a bicyclist. And that's what, our job is education and enforcement, and that's what we try to do.
So would you stop a biker if they don't stop, even if there is no car?
Yeah.
There is no car visible anywhere.
Yeah, they're required to stop. It's just
If
that.
they have to stop, you stop them, and would you give them a ticket?
Probably
Or
not.
just a warning?
I get, this is what, I'll be realistic, and the thing is talking to all these bikelists, my brother-in-law's a bikeless, I think what we're looking for is, they call it a tap. It's basically come up to a stop sign to slow down, to acknowledge that at least it's safe. I think most of the officers can accept that. But it's the ones that, and I see it, we've stopped them. They blow right through the stop sign with no regard for anything else. Those are the ones we're going to stop, and those are the ones down the road we'll probably give tickets to. But a large portion of this is an education piece, and that's where the signs come in and all that. But the bicyclists have to follow the rules of the road, and Jen, I use that example. A lot of our drivers would like to just roll through the stop signs, but we stop them. So.
Even if there's nobody around.
Yeah, well, if we're stopping you, somebody was around.
Bike is different, honestly. When you're biking and you're going long miles and you go to a stop sign, if there is nobody on either side, and you keep going slowly, carefully, it's acceptable. You don't have to really stop, put your foot on the brake. But if there is cars, you have to stop. And you cannot zoom in going at full speed without slowing down.
Right.
I agree with that.
The problem is right
Dangerous.
now, they're not even stopping when there are cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they should be cited for that. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Who's
Sure.
next? Ms. Ketter, thank you. Should we open the door back up? It seems to come.
Okay. So we've reached the magical time of year where we start talking about how are we doing? How are we doing year to date, and start thinking a little bit ahead towards the budget cycle for the coming year. So a lot of this is in your packet already, but I did want to slow down and highlight a couple things on it. The first page, and you should all have a copy of it in front of you in case you can't see the screen. On the first page, we have just a real quick view of the 2018 budget and the good news I have to share about it. When we adopted the budget, we have to project what we think the ending fund balance for the previous year is going to be, because it rolls into the beginning fund balance for 2018, for 17. We managed to adopt 2018 budget at $995,000 for an ending balance. That's what we rolled forward into 2018. It actually turned out to be $70,000 more than that. So we started out the year with a little bit higher of a balance than we thought we were going to. Same thing happened with the street fund and, of course, capital projects fund, the REAP money that just kept flooding in last year. So that's the good news, holding our own with the 25,000 or 25% reserve coming in at 17.8. That was the goal, to keep it where it was at 17 through 18. So page 2, and I saw you all peek ahead to page 2, is when I'm going to start talking about where we actually could potentially end out for 18. You've had in your pack, excuse me, you've had in your packet now this month and previous month items that I've identified at the end of my write-up that are potential for causing a budget amendment for 2018. They're items that fit the criteria that they were expenses that weren't necessarily known at the time of the budget, weren't accounted for. For example, the legal settlement for our employment lawsuit, the Finnegan lawsuit. It is a classic example of how do you budget for something like that? You just can't. A long-time employee leaving, cash out leave time, $51,000. Items that we consciously decided to add for our long-term financial planning, for example, $35,000 for the consultant for FCS. We haven't spent all that $35 yet, but I'm throwing it out there that this is something that's going to impact it. And some equipment that turned out it didn't really quite work the way they were hoping to in the police cars. So what I've done with the second page is plug in that red number, assuming our budget's going to end out just the way it was originally written, and then add in the additional 175 that we're aware of, and how that flows through to the budget. It ends up giving us an ending fund balance at the end of the year of $890,000, which takes our 17.8 down to 14.5. Oh yeah, I take a picture of that face. So it basically picking up another 215,000 of additional roll forward on minimum fund shortage. This isn't to say that there will not be savings found throughout the year. That was one of the reasons why we ended up with the 70,000 gap between what we were anticipating in 17 and what we actually finished. But at this point, all the revenues are coming in just almost exactly on cue. We haven't had anything that's running behind pace the way we did last year in revenues. If you recall, for those of you who were on the council last year, sales tax was kind of the thing that really snuck up on us. It just died on the vine. There was no spikes. So you don't necessarily have to do a budget amendment for that, but when you go over your expenses for your allocated budget, yeah, you do. So we'll probably be talking about this more as we get a little further in the year and see how this plays out, but I wanted to bring this up sooner than later. And then the other thing that I wanted to take a moment on the packet to make sure that you all see, this is also the first time that you get the 2019 budgeting calendar. Highlighted in yellow are all the public hearings. So we have given plenty of chances to come out and tell us how to spend the money, how to not spend the money, what they like, what they don't like, and the key targets we have to hit. As you know, you have a study session where we're going to talk about the long-term financial planning on the 23rd of July. That's not coincidental because, as you could see, on the 1st of August, the department directors will be starting to draft. And getting a little input at the very beginning before we even start is kind of an efficient way to run the show. Okay, questions?
Thank you for making the font so big.
Oh, you're welcome. That was actually a 4 o'clock realization. I had the big one like this in your packet up there, and I'm standing here looking at it, and I couldn't even read it from here. So it's like, oh my gosh, oh no.
Thank you.
I forgot Financial Statements 101. It was so embarrassing. Anything else?
Thanks very much, and we'll see you at a study session for an in-depth dive.
Yeah, we'll be spending some time about decisions for 2019 budget, and then talking a little bit about what the years after that will look like, to kind of give us a picture rather than just numbers.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
One of the things that we're planning to do during the budget process this year that the city hasn't done in the past is we're not going to bring you a line item budget for 2020 and 2021, but we are going to take a shot at predicting if we stay on the same course without looking at a levy lit increase, what 2020 and 2021 will look like, just to kind of give you a 3-year shot going forward. What a lot of cities do, and it's something I'm going to encourage us to do in the future, is they do 2-year budgeting. And so rather than every 12 months putting together a city budget, putting together a 24-month budget. So you've kind of got a better look at the future. So more to come on that. Next, Ryan Osada, our Public
Mr.
Works
Osada.
Director.
Good evening, Council. Just to start out with, give you an update on 84th. As far as schedule goes, I think you guys have seen that they're slowing down a little bit out there. So they're not ahead of schedule anymore. They are still on schedule. I think the biggest issue right now is trying to get the subcontractors to come out and finish their work. So Medina has a few sidewalk patches that need to be installed. The concrete subcontractor hasn't been available. They've canceled several pours, and I'm not sure why. But they have to open the sidewalk on the Medina side before they can start tearing the sidewalk up on the Clyde Hill side. So I'm hoping that they'll have a pour this week, finish that, and then open up the sidewalk maybe Monday.
Great.
So I'm hoping. Let's see, the North Footbridge will be complete tomorrow evening. So it should be open for traffic Wednesday morning. I've ordered a plaque for Shuri.
Thank you.
So
I'm glad that
give me some time to get it, and then we'll do something to install it.
finally it's come to reality.
They've gotten a lot of feedback. I guess people have been pulling over and yelling out their windows to the contractor, great job, and we've been really happy with it. So
You don't see that very often.
They said it's about time.
So you're going to have a ribbon cutting?
Yeah, I think we'll do something like that.
We got to bring out the
Give me a
big
couple weeks to
scissors.
get the plaque, and then we'll
Have a
set something
dedication.
up for it. Yeah. Okay. And then we're starting the new design on the South Bridge, and we're hoping that since the wood is going to be donated, that we can just do a change order with the existing contractor and have them install it. We don't know what the footing situation is going to be yet, but hopefully in the next month we'll know a little bit more about that. And then, let's see, can you turn that on?
You have to turn that on. It's already set. Should be at the top.
I think they turned it off down at the bottom, yeah.
Okay, so last month, our city engineer gave you a presentation on the sidewalk inventory. This is kind of the second part of it. This is the sidewalk trip hazard inventory. This is only part of it. In the last month, I wasn't able to do the whole city, but hopefully next council meeting, I'll have a inventory of the entire city. This is Evergreen Point Road and 24th and 12th. You guys guys have the packets in front of you. So the contractor found 175 trip hazards that are over a quarter of an inch. 18 of them will need to be replaced. So we actually have to take the sidewalk out and replace it. I'm planning on doing that with the ADA upgrades. So that's not something I can do right away. But the trip hazards, this schedule here is going to start on the 16th.
Great.
And will be completed by the end of the week. And then I'm not sure how many more phases we will have, but I'm hoping to have the entire city done by the end of summer.
Nice.
That's my plan.
Thank you, Ryan.
And I think we will have budget for it. We'll find out in the next month.
It's very
But
exciting.
just to give you a quick overview of it, this is just the whole map. This is the zoom of the areas. So each location is numbers. The red is a replacement. Goes through. These are examples of what they're seeing out there. So you guys will see like the little blue markings. That's the contractor marking the hazard. And this is the inventory. Every one of those points is referenced here. We have the size of the triplet, the lineal feet, and then how much, the location, and then at the end there's how much material they're actually going to remove to make it smooth.
So how do they fix it? I was just going to ask.
They actually saw cut it. They
Okay,
take
I
a
see.
saw
Okay.
and basically slice it.
Okay. Thank you.
So will it be ADA compliant
Yes.
afterwards?
No, because the sidewalk isn't wide enough. Our sidewalks are about 40 inches wide. We have to be compliant with 48. So we don't
48.
have really ADA compliant sidewalks. That's something that our city engineers work on. I didn't want to take them away from the ADA compliance because they're kind of working on our transition plan.
Yeah.
So this contractor is going to work on our short-term fixes. And hopefully, if things go well, I should be able to get most of it done, if not all of it done by the end of summer. in the entire city.
And what's the cost for that?
That's so great.
So I'm guessing the cost is somewhere around $70,000.
Okay. Great.
So that's within our budget. I budgeted $200,000 this year.
Great.
So I think that'll be okay.
Awesome.
All right?
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you for taking the
So-
initiative on that.
Yeah, no problem.
Speaking about the width of the sidewalk,
Mm-hmm.
we got recently an email from a resident again, which we have been complaining about the bushes growing into the sidewalk that they need to be trimmed.
Right.
You know, we have been talking about it for a lot. You hire seasonal workers to do it, but then not all residents do it, and you notify them, and it takes forever for anything to get done. Is there any way to get this done and be done with it, and maybe charge the residents if they don't accommodate that? Is this something we should be discussing here and
That's some-
proposing that?
The issue has come up of whether or not we can go out and actually do the work and then lien residents' properties. That's a legal process that, to lien properties, that I'd really need to spend some time talking with the city attorney about. You know, it sounds simple, but it's much more complicated than that.
Yeah, I don't know if that
Because
would
you're
lengthen
actually-
our notification period. Would that?
Yeah, if you're actually for you to be able to actually lien someone's property is a much more complicated process. I mean,
We're only waiting 2 weeks
Yeah.
right now.
yeah, I mean, we're,
And if we've notified them last year, we'll just come in and do it. We'll give it one shot, one knock at the door.
At the expense of the city, basically, if they don't
Correct.
reply.
So we did that one on 84th and 10th.
Mhm.
That was a pretty big one. And that person or that resident was notified last year 2 times. We didn't have time to get to it. They had told us that they were going to do it over the course of the year. It never got done. So we gave them one knock at the door this year, and I told them go ahead and do it, and we trimmed it back quite a bit. They were upset, but it's open there now.
And the one that lady was complaining about in the email, was that taken care of? I don't remember what it is, but.
What area was she?
Was that the Lake Washington Boulevard?
I think so.
That was one email.
It was
I
the
got.
last
I don't
email that
know.
we got.
Yeah,
Yeah, that one actually was taken care of.
Yeah.
That's the one by the Chevron station.
yeah.
Yeah, if you go by there now, it's pretty much gone, yeah.
So those bushes are on city right of way, right? So those bushes are city's property. So
Wow.
in that case, we should just pay for ourselves instead of charge the owner.
Well, not
Because it's not
necessarily.
on
We have
their
an
property.
ordinance that
Huh?
states that the adjacent property owners are responsible for the
Is it?
landscape, yes.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of the property owners have planted all that. So, I mean, I think it's just better for us to at least notify them prior to cutting it.
Yeah, it's not unusual throughout Medina for people to have their landscaping growing into the city right-of-way. I mean, if you go down Evergreen Point Road, just about every single property does. It's something different for them to block the sidewalk. And that's what we're trying to do. And part of it also is just, it's a learning process for the residents, is we want them to realize we're serious when we require them to do it. So that's why from year over year, if people still haven't complied, we'll go back and cut it out. I mean, and the landscaping growing over the sidewalks is chronic. It's not acute. We're not going to fix it. We're going to continue to address it. But it's part of the reason that we ask for budget to be able to hire the summer folks. Is that's a big part of their job.
Yeah, one of my neighbors telling me that, oh, the city just cut all the neighborhood, but they stopped just before my house. Can you get them back?
Any questions?
Thank you, Ryan.
No, thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you, Ryan.
Steve Wilcox, our Development Services Director.
Hello, Mr. Wilcox.
Hello. So if you haven't heard, Development Services Department is under reorganization. I thought I'd like to give you a little bit of update tonight about what's happening with that reorganization. There's really about three primary goals that I see that we need to achieve, and they're broad, but I think you'll agree that providing better service internally and externally is a needed function of what we've been doing. We need to improve. Simplifying our permit processes as we're able to is certainly another goal. And I think in all of this we can reduce our expenses too. I think there's some consolidation in our efforts that we can do and make that happen. To get to the goals, we need to establish staff. Right now we're kind of swimming out there and we're just getting the daily tasks done and not moving forward. We need to provide the tools for the staff that they need to get the job done, and of course to modernize a little bit. I think you'll see me coming with some 2019 budget requests that'll get us there. You'll see some administrative process changes that I can make that I'll take care of. Code amendments, working with Planning Commission and the Council, of course, and also establishing a advisory board to help us get through some of these issues that we're going to be facing over the next months and year, I think. Next year will be busy. Interesting times. Right now we're in the process of hiring a planning manager, and the Prothman Company is helping us with that. I think the closing date is tomorrow, if I remember correctly. The first review of applicants is the 23rd, and by mid-August, I think 16th or 17th, we're going to have the first interviews. That's the schedule. So,
About how many applicants do you have so far? Do you know?
is it 10?
Yeah, I think we've got 10 solid applicants so far. The headhunter agency is doing their kind of initial review of the applications, and then they're going to get together with Steve and I later this month. And next month, looking ahead, we're going to be holding interviews, and we'll be looking to council member, planning commissioners, some of the folks from the community that are involved in the development to set up a couple of interview panels. Also, of course, city staff will be involved in the interview process.
Thank you.
looking forward to having somebody in a seat.
What's the difference between an advisory board and the planning commission?
Well, I think that on some of the tasks we're looking at, I think that having some citizen input would be a good idea. Probably, for example, architects, contractors who we work with normally on a regular basis would be nice to hear from on some of these things that we're going to be dealing with. People aren't typically sitting in this room listening to this conversation. I'd like to have their input in some of this. Some places we'd like to go is paperless plan review. That's not going to happen immediately. I went to some training with Robert Grumbach, in fact, 2 or 3 months ago, March actually, and the people who were putting it on said this can be a 4-year task. If you're not dedicated to it, it can be a 4-year task. If you are dedicated to it, you might get it done in a year to 2 years. We'd like to be dedicated to it and get it done. We may consult someone to help us with that. I was talking with Michael about that. We may see what that would cost us to do that, but that might be a way to actually lead us through this very complicated pathway. Just doing paperless plan review at my desk is one thing, but actually having the ability to intake plans properly and safely and then to archive them, there's a myriad of people involved. It's not just one person. There's a lot of different expertise involved with this to make this happen. So that's going to take a little time, but we want to get started on that, which means that we also are going to be asking for some tools eventually. Tools meaning that we're going to have to set up our offices for the planning manager and myself to do those reviews. And we'd like to do that sooner than later. That's part of it. No particular order, but of course, you know, the CMP process and enforcement is a pretty hot topic, and I'm certainly going to be on top of that. The enforcement part is something that we can work on now. It'll be a lot better when we have more staff to provide a little more dedication to and consistency for. So don't expect a miracle right now. But I did issue 3 warnings over the past month on two parking violations and a work hours violation. And then I'm going to be working with our attorney on determining how to ramp those up. We have a good ordinance now to work with, code enforcement ordinance, so we might as well utilize it. I just want to understand it better, and I don't want to get us in trouble, so I want to make sure that I'm following it exactly. And once again, consistency is a big thing. We're going to do it. Other things we're looking at, been talking with Sean about new planning commission calendar, help track our work better, maybe model it after the council's calendar. Talking about with Sean again about finalizing the new planning commission work plan format. We need to do that. We'll get that done. And I mentioned reconfiguring the 2 offices for electronic plan review. We're also going to have to consider paper plan review too. It's not going to instant thing to just change over to electronic plan review. There's going to be people that are always going to have, or at least for my term here, paper. So we're going to have to consider that as well. And last but not least, I'm going to eventually propose that we sell the 2 former police chief Tahoes and probably replace them with one leased vehicle that properly suits our needs here. And hopefully we'll do an analysis on cost, of course, and see if that will something that will work out for that. Any questions for me?
Questions? Thank you for taking this on. I've heard from a number of people who have said that they really have seen what they characterize as a big change and that you're looking for a way to find solutions for them. And so I just want to pass that along to you and thank you very much for taking the helm. I know it's been a bit of a blizzard.
It has been, but it's clearing up.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good evening again, Your Honor. Just a couple of quick items. First off, as we've discussed at the last 2 council meetings, we have the 2018-2019 work plan and also the vision and mission statement resolutions before you this evening. And unless there's any questions beyond what we've already discussed, I'd recommend that they both be approved.
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the 2018-2019 work plan resolution and vision and mission statements?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you. Second was dealing with fire and emergency medical services. This is just a little bit of a follow-up to what we discussed at our last council meeting. During the last budget process, which I saw this before some of you are on the city council, we had some extensive discussion of this. We spent over a year working with our partners in Bellevue on a new 10-year contract. And that contract covers the Point cities as well as Beaux Arts. They consider themselves a Point city, I don't. And also the city of Newcastle that contract with Bellevue. And I'm not going to put this up on the board, but included in your packet is a short PowerPoint that looks like this. And on the first page of it, you have a spreadsheet. And if you look at the yellow line in the middle of the spreadsheet, would you like it if I put this up on the board?
Yeah.
All right, I'm just going to walk over there. I should have learned from Julie and made the numbers bigger. What this is it shows the cost that the city has paid for fire services over the last couple of years. Starting in 2016, we spent about $692,000 for fire services. In 2017, we paid $696,000, and then our bill this year was $740,000 under the new contract. And I always try to provide some context for numbers so you don't just look at them and say, well, is $740,000 a good number or not? There are two other consortiums of cities and fire districts in King County, and I'm using them as a basis for comparison. The first is Eastside Fire and Rescue. Eastside Fire and Rescue is a consortium that includes the cities of Sammamish, Issaquah, North Bend, and large rural areas that stretch all the way from Renton clear up to North Bend. And I'll talk a little bit about funding formulas in a moment, but if we were part of that consortium, our bill for 2018 would be about $1.2, $1.3 million.
Is that because of travel time and gas?
Excuse me?
Is that because of travel time and gas?
No, let me get to the funding formula in a moment. It's about how they load their numbers.
Okay.
And the other that I'd compare us to is the city of Redmond and Fire District 34. Fire District 34 is a large rural district that provides services north and east of the city of Redmond, and the city of Redmond provides their fire services. If we were part of that consortium, our cost this year would have been about $958,000. Now, where do those costs come from? To Jen's point, if you look at the bottom of the spreadsheet here, you'll see that the Bellevue Consortium, we have a funding formula that 12.5% of it is based on assessed value. And I know anytime you use the word assessed value, everybody's radar goes up because we all know assessed value in the Points communities is higher than in other parts of the state. There's also 50% of the cost is based on calls for service. In other words, you pay for what you use. That generates 50% of the cost. It's a 3-year rolling average to determine what that amount is for each year. And then 37.5%, the remaining, is based on population. Population essentially flows right along with calls for service. If you were to look at Eastside Fire and Rescue below that, you'd see that 85% of their funding formula is based on assessed value, and only 15% is based on calls for service. That's where you get the difference. Now, it's a different group of cities and a different consortium. That's what they have agreed to. And the city of Redmond uses a system where they determine the actual cost of an individual fire station and then spread that cost either to themselves as the city or also to fire district. So my point is this. If you were to look, and you've seen this chart in various forms any number of times, ignore my chicken scratch at the bottom. Right now about 11% of our budget in the general fund goes to pay for fire services. Now, fire services are not free. It's expensive. It's a big bite out of our budget. But my point is that Bellevue does provide those services to us at a very reasonable price. I think we've negotiated a good 10-year contract with them. And based on what other cities are paying in the consortiums that they're in, I think we did a pretty good job with this contract.
Where did they start with assessed value?
Didn't they start almost at 50%?
That's
before we started. Yeah, you were part of the discussion.
Staff did a great job
Yeah.
looking out for us in that regard because that assessed value was much higher when they first started the conversation.
Any questions about that?
So what's the timeline? I remember we discussed that extensively a year ago. I thought it was already finalized and approved for 10 years.
It
I
is.
was not
This is-
expecting
this
to
is-
hear about it
yeah.
for another 10 years.
This is year one. And the reason I brought it up is because there was some question about it at the last council
Oh, so
meeting.
that's only question.
Yeah, there was
Oh,
question at the last council meeting, and, I also try to be cognizant of the fact that not all of us have been here forever. We do have some newer members of the council. But yeah, this is year one, 2018 is year one of a 10-year contract.
Yeah.
The next issue is dealing with, as you've heard this evening, there's been a lot of discussion on social media about regional trail restrooms. And I just wanted to be very clear about where city staff stands on this, is we are very supportive of building facilities for the benefit of our citizens and for our community. I mean, you've heard from Ryan about any number of projects, tonight you heard about sidewalks. What I'm really not terribly supportive of is the idea of spending city dollars for what are really essentially regional facilities. And given the cost of building, maintaining, cleaning public restrooms, I've worked with other jurisdictions that had public restrooms that provided access sometimes along trails or for larger parks. It's a lot of money, and it really isn't something that we as a city can afford to provide for the greater community. While construction costs would perhaps come out of capital, all of the maintenance, all of the cleaning, all of the graffiti removal is all a general fund expense. So it's something to bear in mind when you're listening to this discussion from different people about building a restroom that essentially provides a regional service. The last item I really had was dealing with study sessions. I really appreciate the fact that at the beginning of this year, the council agreed to add additional meeting each month as a study session. We've only had a couple of them. What we'd really like to do, and this really comes from Amy and I both, is we really would like to tighten up, or what we choose to send to study sessions, how much time we plan to spend them at study sessions on any kind of an issue. So if there is an issue that you would like to have discussed at a study session, bring it up at a council meeting. Let's get a council consensus on it. If it's something that's going to spend, an hour, or we think it's something that's worth a full 2-hour discussion, let's go ahead and put that on there. And that way, when you get your monthly spreadsheet that shows all the future things that are going to be discussed at council meetings, we can include study session items on that as well.
And Mike, when I joined council, you explained to me what study sessions were for, which I didn't. I thought that they were just a second city council meeting. And traditionally, they've been used for staff to give us more in-depth reporting or, introduce a new idea, for instance, going into the budget, going into undergrounding, the sorts of things that we can't, it's not best covered in a 15-minute clip. So that's the sort of thing, and that's why I think that's why you explained to me why you and Amy are saying if there's things that you want staff to prepare for them to go deep dive with us, let's just talk about it and get it on a calendar.
Yeah, for example, one of the things we're going to be doing in 2019 is it's time for periodic review on the waterfront. And dealing with any sort of issues that the council went through and the staff went through with the Planning Commission a couple of years ago. If somebody wants to know what is a bulkhead and why do we have them, it would be good for us to spend an extended period of time discussing that, probably at a study session rather than at a council meeting.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, I about the study section, I think we need to really look at the underground, because we have the Cablevision cables, right? And I had troubles to get the cable working, and then the cable company says they couldn't even see my modem, right? And then I find out somebody was working on the poles and pull out the cables from the poles, and leave the connection just like the pin exposed for almost a week or two. And so anybody can hack that way, and I was a victim. And then I called the Cablevision people come to see what's going on here. Why is mine doesn't work? You have a pole just across the street, and with the pin is open. Is that mine, right? So they come over and they say that's why it's not yours. But I actually saw the people was pulling the the cables leave right there. And they said, this one is yours, but I find mine was like pulled down from the pole, like in the height, somebody pulled it down. So he has to take ladders to nail it down. So what I see is what they do is they leave the wires open. And so anybody just can have a blade to go around to cut out your communication of some sort. So we need to have it more secure, for example, underneath, so people couldn't easily to hack on you. If someday something happened, we have an emergency, some bad guys just going around to cut all the communication will be dead. And also the power as well, they just go ahead and support to pull
So
down.
he's working with Puget Sound Energy. Do you know when they're going to get back to you? And
We were hoping to have something from Puget Sound Energy for a study session in August. Having said that, the August study session is scheduled for the week before school starts again. And traditionally, that's a week a lot of people go on vacation. So we were going to send an email out to you in the next couple of weeks. I'm kind of assuming that study session is not going to happen. Just because
could we do it in September?
I was going to say, so we probably will move it to September.
Well, that way we'll make them, because they've come to you and Ryan unprepared twice.
Yeah,
It's
that's
better
a
if you
nice
give
term
them,
for it.
keep them on the August deadline. And then you guys will have a couple of weeks to work with them to get it to where you want it to be. Are people okay to move it to September?
I'm sorry, to move the study session?
The Puget Sound? The Puget Sound to September?
Sure.
Do you want to get back to us?
Yeah, we'll get back to you.
Okay.
So
Now your turn.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
So we've been asking for a while now for an update on the website, on the relaunch, and this is important to me at least because this gets to what we were talking about earlier with the St. Thomas publicity and notification. I think we said the new site was going to go live in April, then maybe in May. Now we're in July. It still hasn't been done. And the reason I bring this up is because it's really hard to use. It's really hard to find stuff. And my point is, if we could please make the site better, more people will use it, and then more people will know about things that are going on in our community, and we sort of like raise the level of awareness for everybody. So for me at least, it's really important that we get this done. And I would love for that to happen.
And it's extremely important to Amy and I as well, and we're continuing to work on it. It's embarrassing that we have not made more progress, but understand that it is a priority to us. And
Okay.
it's not we have not dropped the ball. We're continuing to work on it.
Okay, can you come back to us with a new ETA of launch date, maybe by when school starts or something?
We will do our best to get it done by the end of the summer.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. And again, it's just simply the easier it is to use, more people are going to use it.
No, we understand that.
And that's all I'm trying to get at. The other question I had was regarding the restroom over by Fairweather, because where all the bicyclists are and stuff. I understand I understand your feelings about building something, and I understand your logic. Can we maybe put something out there like temporary just during the summer months or something, so we don't get emails from residents who are seeing what they're seeing out in our parks and our trail, and maybe it goes away from like November through March or something. I'd like to, there has to be a solution here. I understand we don't need to necessarily build something super nice and causes crime and becomes a magnet. But on the other hand, it feels like we're kind of punting on this, and I'm sure there's got to be a middle ground somewhere. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, can I join the conversation?
Sure.
So I also have some serious safety concerns and concerns about crime, and I'd love to hear from the chief on that. And I think Claudia Balducci mentioned that as well. So from my perspective, people are coming through Medina for a very short period of time, and I don't know why we have to give them a bathroom just for the 150 feet that they're coming through Medina. It's a regional trail, and they're coming and going somewhere, but if we build a bathroom, they will come, right? We'll become the bathroom stop.
Even if it's a porta potty.
Yes, they will come and we'll become the bathroom stop. And I have heard from so many residents that we don't want to be the bathroom stop. The fact that they're going through for 150 yards, that's not when they have to go to the bathroom. And I know some serious bikers, and I'll tell you that they will go to the bathroom wherever they are when they need to go. And they don't, so that's not who we're serving. And I'm really concerned about the crime part. I mean, you look at Seattle, what's happened over there.
I don't
they put
know.
the
I mean,
public
I don't
bathrooms.
know if I'm worried about bicyclists causing crime. I mean, what I'm concerned about is that they have been riding their bikes and they cross the bridge, and now they've crossed the bridge and they gotta go, and they're going. And so my point is simply, I agree that we probably don't need to build something super nice. I don't know if I see bicyclists causing crime from a porta potty.
It's not the bicycle. It becomes an attractive nuisance by a.
Maybe I misunderstood then, so I'm sorry.
Or people who meet up there.
Yeah, because there's also already a lot of activity in the summertime, as there is like more than ever before. And it's also known as a place where drug deals are made. And so we don't want to encourage that even further by having anything there. And I understand, because I certainly wouldn't want to, be seeing people urinating, but then again, they'll go when they go.
Yeah, seems like a funny one here.
Chief, can you weigh in?
My concern in talking to my peers about this issue, and I'll just use an example. If you go to any transit station, transit park and ride, there's not a restroom. And the primary reason, it attracts crime. And I understand the argument about the bike rides, and whatever you guys decide we'll support. It's just based on experience talking to my peers, it's going to attract a certain element that this community doesn't want. And once we're already, and I agree, we're already seeing activity there because of the path, because of the bus stop, that we're already seeing an increase in certain clientele, frankly, that they're not residents here. And I'm just afraid, and my big concern is whether it's temporary or permanent, we're going to have we're going to have a certain element. It's not the bike riders. I mean, yeah, the bike riders are the ones urinating, but talking to the bikers and people I know, they're going to go wherever. And my biggest concern is, I know your community and we're a part of your community. There is an element that's going to be attracted, and it's going to create up space for them to do certain things that, and they're going to start coming. And right now, that's my concern is, we're able to right now handle the way it is, but if we put that element there, it's just one more reason for certain people to come.
Chief, we see a lot of movement today at Hunts Point, during business hours, Monday through Thursday. Outside of that, we typically direct them to the gas station, because that's obviously a direction from the gas stations would be meaningful to walk.
I don't mean to belabor the point, but do we have an issue with the restrooms at Medina Park? Or is that a different issue?
We have.
It's not a transit stop.
Is that's the major difference?
I would say the location on that one is, and we have issues in Medina Park, but it's not next to a park and ride. It's
Sure.
not next to a transit, and
Okay.
it's not next to a trail.
So I guess the message then to residents when they bring this up is that we don't want to invite a nuisance.
Well, I think-
Is that the talking
I think
point here?
my other, to Mayor Sabi's point, and talking with a number of the other communities, what they do is they do wayfaring, is they say, gas station, this many feet up ahead, because if there are people who are just out enjoying a bike ride and they want to know where to go to the bathroom, then tell them where to go, right? But in that way, you keep people moving through on the trail. We get people at our city hall too. I know you get people at your city hall. I'm sure the same thing happens all along the trail. But it doesn't invite the criminal element that once they're here, it might be really difficult to get rid of them.
Okay, thank you.
I think one answer we can say is what Claudia told us. If the county that's responsible for all these miles of trails all around the county and the metro and the Sound Transit, they decided not to have that because it has been an issue for them. I don't think our city has to volunteer to have our own bathrooms. no matter how valuable this is. They have to figure it out. If they decide, I mean, the same thing in Seattle. There is no public bathrooms in the city of Seattle. You have to go to a Starbucks or something. So,
And they tried it, and it was
and it wasn't successful, right? Unless you have them like in other countries around the world where they have an actual tenant sitting there and you pay €2 in Europe to use it every time. But there is a guy who's being paid that money. I don't think we're going to be able to do that.
And that's the key, having a physical body present.
Got it. All right, thank you.
Other issues?
That's all I have.
I don't have an issue, but how was AWC? Did you learn anything new?
Actually, I really did. There were two sessions in particular. One of them was dealing with our friends in the state legislature just passed a new law that makes it much easier, even a city for a population of 1,000 or more, for a group of citizens to decide they want to have a ward system or have council members elected by districts within the city. So since all of you people live up at North Point, and there's nobody representing Medina Heights, the folks from Medina Heights or Medina Circle may show up and decide they want to create a ward system in Medina. I learned the process, thanks to our friends in the state legislature, by which that they can go do that. And I also...
We did try to get them to bump that number up, and they did not.
Yeah, we did. In my personal opinion, it's our friends in Olympia once again killing a gnat with a sledgehammer. The second item that was actually really interesting is I don't know whether any of you have ever read the book The Boys in the Boat, which is about a group of folks from University of Washington who were a rowing team, and they went to the 1936 Olympics in Germany and beat out the Nazis for the gold medal. If you haven't read that book, I read it a while ago. It's well worth doing. One of the folks who was in the process of making a documentary film about them was there and gave a great presentation about the film that he's doing, and we got to see a rough cut of the film. So that was actually really fascinating.
Oh, nice.
That's a study session subject. Maybe.
Yeah, study session movie. Good idea.
At Alex's house with wine, it'll be a great one.
I mean, for a duck to say good things about a bunch of huskies, is a little bit difficult.
Okay, other questions?
I'd like to go back to the study sessions because thinking back on when we talked about adding study sessions back in January, one of the things we talked about was giving us a chance to sort of roundtable a little bit more casually. And that's something I don't think I've seen at any of the study sessions. And Scott, I think, suggested the other day that that's because right now they're noticed as special meetings, which means they're for a noted purpose. And that's consistent with what Cindy just said about they are for the direct transfer of information from others to us rather than for our discussion purposes. And I would suggest that we think about changing that and instead noticing them as regular meetings and including on the agenda a 15-minute roundtable where people could bring forward things maybe that don't get fleshed out or do, but maybe give that a try. I'm open to other ways to look at that, but it seems like since one of our goals is to work together well, and that was one of the suggestions that came up early on about how we could try to improve our working style would be to talk more. And we can't just meet at a coffee shop and do that.
I agree. I recall that exact thing, like the purpose was to be able to have more discussion and be more informed rather than having to take, extra time outside of this meeting. And I feel like now they're presentations rather than conversation. And I was asked before about the view and sunlight ordinance or even garbage cans on the street. I know we reviewed it last week, but just using that time to have discussion and to, say, okay, we're looking at this again. Here's why. Nothing's changed. You want to talk about it? Yes, let's figure out when it's going to be, when are we going to reinstate the old process and things like that. So so more conversation rather than what we're limited to here would be hopefully achieved by your proposal.
So, any more comments on that? So I think it's a great idea. One of the things I want to be mindful of is that make sure that the public gets advance notice of what we're going to be discussing. So I think it's fine to put something like a roundtable discussion. But if there are substantive issues that we want to discuss and we're going to call a meeting to discuss them, I do think we want to put them on an agenda and let the people know who might be interested in coming. I want to be mindful of that.
I'd say two things. One, folks in Medina really don't like it when we talk about stuff, but we don't tell them before we talk about it.
Yes,
So I don't have a problem with having roundtable discussions, but I think it would be helpful if, let's say 2 weeks before the study session, even just if you just send me an email and say, I don't think this garbage ordinance that we passed is really a good idea. It isn't working well. I've heard that from my neighbors. Can we talk about it? Great. Let's put that on there. We'll give it a 15, 20 minutes or whatever it deserves. But that way we at least have it on an agenda. I mean, to your point, we can certainly change the wording as far as how we advertise it so that we can have a little more free-flowing discussion. And the second issue that is, all of us are more than happy to answer a question with, I have no idea what the answer to that is. I need to go do some more research and I'll get back to you. We're not afraid to tell you that we don't know the answer to a question. But by the same token, we like to be able to spend some time preparing before we have a discussion. So for example, if somebody were to bring up the garbage can issue, we would be able to come in with some information and say, well, this is how many citations we've given on garbage cans. This is how many citizens we've talked with. So that we're prepared as city staff to have that conversation.
No, and I agree. I'm not saying that like we just show up.
Yeah.
Here's my list.
We just start talking about whatever's top of mind, but no, we could say, okay, garbage can, we're passing that ordinance. Now, what does enforcement look like? How is that going to happen? Just to get that sense of kind of what we had talked about with you guys one time is that end-to-end view of the votes and decisions that we make and what's the impact and how have you guys thought about that? And I see a study session as a great place to have that conversation, you guys be prepared for it, and then we can say, great, we've made the right decision by passing this ordinance.
Yeah,
Okay, well, we can notice them differently, and then to Mike's point, if you've got a substantive city business issue that you want to discuss, send it to him and allocate how much time you think you want.
Hey, and understand, we're all learning our way forward about the study sessions. I mean, this is just something we added, 5 months ago, guys. I mean, it's just we're kind of working our way forward with it.
And it seems like the other thing we could do, to your point about wanting to make sure that we give notice of specifically what we're going to discuss, is if something does come up in the moment in a conversation that's an idea that came out of that meeting that is part of a roundtable discussion, I think that's fair. But then maybe we agree that we aren't going to take action on it until it's been discussed in a meeting where it was specifically noticed.
But you can't take action in a study session anyway.
Well,
So
we
it's always
could if we
discussion.
noticed it as a regular meeting, I think.
So. Can we take action in?
Yeah.
We'd change the way we notice.
Yes, you can always take action at a meeting. In a special meeting, you have to take action only on the things that are listed on the agenda. At a regular meeting, you can take action on anything that comes up to you, whether it's on the agenda or not.
Right. So if it's not listed before, you can discuss it, like you said.
Right.
But don't take action until maybe the next.
Exactly. That would be my
Right.
point, would be that there's a middle ground between let's not discuss anything that we didn't raise 2 weeks earlier and let's make sure we give the public notice of everything we're going to discuss.
Yeah, that's good suggestion. Okay.
The only other thing I was going to mention is the next council meeting is scheduled for the 13th of August. Is that correct? Are folks around for the 13th? Do you guys know yet?
I don't think we've ever really canceled a city council meeting because of vacations, have we?
We've moved some. So
We didn't think we would have a quorum, yeah.
I'll be here.
Let's put it this way.
I'll be here.
Does anybody know they're not going to be here on the 13th?
I know I won't be here.
But if we have a quorum, I think we should
Fair enough.
Keep it
Just wanted to bring it up.
Okay, other questions, discussions for Mike or for the council? Okay, any public comment? All right, if there's no objection, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.